What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to take a look back at Heavy Rain, a game that I feel gets dragged through the freaking mud as time has gone on. And look, it's a game that I'm a little conflicted on myself. I overall would say love. I do love this game. I have such a connection and such a history with it that we'll talk about in this video, but there are issues, and the more you look into them, or the more you actually focus on the issues of this game, the plot holes, I would say in particular, the game can definitely fall apart, okay? And the game definitely has its flaws. We're going to talk about all of this stuff in this video, but I wanted to look back. It's the 15-year anniversary of it, and what a journey. I mean, truly. So let me just quickly talk about my history with this game, and we'll go into just the actual review and talking about the character story and all that jazz. So I got this game not when it first came out, but I actually got this game around my birthday in 2010, so June of 2010. And I remember I actually skipped. I'm a martial artist. I did martial arts growing up and still kind of do it on my own. And I skipped, I believe, like a week and a half of, like the classes, like Tuesday night, Saturday during the day. And the person that taught me it actually was a little concerned of like, why are you missing these? I never would miss before. So that should tell you how much the Origami Killer really got to me, because I had to figure out who did this. Just so many memories, and that game, you're like hitting you raw, and like, me being maybe 13, 14 at the time, I freaking loved it. Okay, a friend of mine at school had the game, and he skipped, I think, 3 days of school, and he texted me and he says, "Alex, I've got to find the Origami Killer. I can't go to school." I'm not kidding. I still text him to this day, and I say, "Hey, do you remember when you did that?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I absolutely, I loved it. I needed to skip those days." So the game, again, I think playing it for the very first time, and I think being kind of younger and not really focusing, I would say, honestly, on those plot holes, the game rocks. The game freaking rocks. And, at the time, cutting edge visuals, I mean, it is a little rough around the edges now. I actually ran into a couple bugs myself, especially kind of when John and Scott were, the kids, and he gets stuck in the water pot, and holy Jesus, there were some really weird glitches that were going on. Actually, that entire flashback sequence was next to broken for me, so that was a lot of fun. But, I've played this game, oh my God, I want to say probably 6-7 times. I honestly remember every part of it. Maybe I can't do it like just off the top of my head, but as soon as I see it, I say, okay, I know exactly, what happens in this scene. I know a lot of the permutations, different things that can happen, based off what you choose. I mean, I got deep into this game, and I really enjoyed it. And I think still to this day, okay, so that's kind of my history. I think still to this day, this game tells a rock-solid story. Now, it's a story that they have to jump around, and they have to, like, specifically with Scott Shelby, and this is going to contain spoilers, okay? I know people ask me, "Alex, when you talk about old games, break them down, like really go into depth because they're so old." So we're going to do that, okay? I'm going to go into who is the Origami Killer. I'm going into spoilers on this game, and it's going to be probably a long video. So if you've never played the game before, I still think it's worth it. I think it's kind of a weird journey, and you may or may not like it, but I'm going to go into some spoilers in this video. So kind of sticking right along with that point, I mean, the main thing that this game has to do, right, is hide Scott. Okay, you're playing as the killer. And when you do that and you have internal thoughts, that's a really... Now, again, when I'm playing this at 13, 14, I'm not thinking about it. I'm not thinking about that Scott has like 10 seconds maybe max to kill the clock, shop owner. And somehow Lauren doesn't hear him, even though she's just looking at a ballerina figure. It's not loud. It's not something that takes too much energy. She actually seems like a pretty smart girl. So it's like, why she doesn't notice that he's not there anymore? I don't understand. But I will say, again, playing it kind of as like an impressionable younger person, it's like, I actually kind of bought it. It's like, the game is trying to hide it from you. I think, the issues with this game really come into play when you take it seriously. And I'm not saying taking it seriously is wrong. I think that's fine. I think you have every right to take it how you want to. And the game is portrayed as serious. The game is... like, why does Scott react in certain ways, right? Like, when he goes in the cutscene when he's, with the clock owner, and he's saying, like, "Oh my God, like, what happened?" He's just doing that for performance. Like, he's doing it for us, the player, even though, in this type of game, there is no player. Does that make sense? It's all real. So if he's doing a reaction and Lauren is not in the room, he's doing it for himself, right? Like, it's a legitimate, like, raw impression that he's doing. The player is not really there. We don't really exist in the entirety of the game. And that's how the game wants us to do it. It wants to be taken seriously. So I will say, that is where this game breaks down. When you have supernatural elements that I actually really love, but then I was like, what in God's name is happening? I'll be honest, it was only until this time, 6-7 times playing, 15 years later, I never knew about that cut content. And for those that don't know, back in 2015, people did, like, somebody, I think, like, got the actual footage, and there was a lot of video essays that were done. So Ethan, right, he's got 2 blackouts, I believe, in the entire game. It only happens kind of in the first couple hours. He blacks out, he wakes up, and, the second time he's got the origami figure, in his hand. No clue how that happens, but the cut content was there was going to be supernatural elements, and him and Scott kind of share this psychological link where every time Scott does the crime, kills the kid, right, drowns the kid, then Ethan, like, takes that kind of energy or whatever you want to call it in his mind. So he's transported, and he's underwater, and you have to find all these things, and you eventually get out of your kind of haze by finding the child that Scott, drowned, and that's how you break out of it. Now, okay, I mean, honestly, I don't really mind there being supernatural elements in this game. I think that actually almost makes it a little fun. But what I will say is, how in God's name does Ethan actually so he blacks out at the carousel, right? And then he wakes up in the middle of the road. How does Scott know he's having an episode? How does Scott walk up to him and say, okay, he kind of looks out of it. He doesn't seem to notice me. I'm going to take his son in public and just walk him away, but I'm going to leave this figure with him, and I'm going to assume that he's not going to notice that I'm giving him this figure, and then I'm going to walk away. So, those kind of moments definitely do break down, okay? The internal thoughts of Scott Shelby, where he's like, he really doesn't seem like the killer. Now, there has been some discussion where it's like, well, he could just be like a schizophrenic, or he could have like a multiple personalities, and those people really can almost kind of hide themselves, right? And it's like, I'm willing to buy that enough. And here's the thing. I've really only talked about this game's flaws so far. I really like the game. So if I'm going to lean into where I do like it, I'm honestly willing to give them an okay amount of the things I've discussed so far. Because I will say, it is a video game, and again, it depends on how serious you want to take any of these video games, or, anything in life. Playing it for the first time, or even playing it really trying to kind of ignore that outside noise, or if you're playing it, say I'm playing it now, right, which I did, really trying to pretend like you're playing it for the first time, right, where you don't know, where it's going. I think it really holds up. I really do. A lot of people will complain about that illusion of choice, which I talk about in a lot of different videos, right? We're still in the age of it now, by the way. Okay, now this was 2010. I think one of the things that this game does so well, and I'm actually still shocked how well it is the branching paths, okay? Now, I actually think Quantic Dream was one of, if not the best companies that could do it. Then they kind of lost their luster a little bit. I would say around Beyond Two Souls, even though I did a video on Beyond Two Souls last year for its anniversary. I like that game a lot, but it doesn't, that game really lacks the branching paths, and they picked it up again with Detroit Become Human, okay? And other studios, I would say, kind of leapfrog them in terms of, hey, you make a decision, you make X decision, Y thing is going to happen. I will say, though, Heavy Rain feels really good. Like, when I'm playing it, I'm going kind of for the perfect run. I don't actually try to ever, and that's something kind of maybe weird with me. I mean, I don't like the good guys to lose. I don't want to lose characters. Even if I'm replaying it for the 6th, 7th time like I am, I still try to not have anybody die. Now, this game, there's a couple times where you can absolutely lose people, and I actually would say, again, that's kind of a pro of this game, that the fact that Ethan, the way you handle things, right, with the trials, and I love I think the trials are so freaking cool. I will say, Ethan cutting off his finger, still to this day, I cannot believe how much that gets me. Like, I don't know what the word is, but like how tense I am, and I'm not going to show it just be, YouTube purposes, and I don't know what's right or wrong on YouTube anymore, versus even back in the day, but, I did the scissors this time because I wanted the trophy, so I tried a different item, to take him out, and it is just so painful for the camera camera angle to be the way that it is, and him just snapping, and holy, I mean, it is bad, like it is, but you know what? It really does connect you, and I do think the general idea of this game, right? Basically, how far will a father go to save his son? I love it. I love it so much. Now, it really does break down a little bit when you think about why does Scott target Ethan? We're going to kind of go back and forth here, right? I did a little pro, now we got to go a little con. I love the trials. I love the idea that Scott, because I saw people try to like theorize other things where it's like, well, what if Ethan died in the beginning and then you play it as like one of the boys and the other boy got kidnapped, and especially because of the bird thing in the beginning. That is one thing that I noticed specifically this time where, Ethan talks about the bird that dies, right? And he talks about how, some things just happen, right? Some things just happen in life and you have to accept it. Like things happen the way they do and you just have to kind of roll with it. Those are that's actually incredibly well written. People will dog on David Cage, and he's definitely not perfect, and he has his good and bad moments for sure. I love that line. I think that's very, very powerful. And then it's like, well, he almost kind of forgets that, right? And I think that's probably where it loses some of its steam because, I understand, like, he's making a bird analogy, and then all of a sudden he loses his kid, and it's like, oh, why didn't he connect the dots? Well, they're different magnitudes for sure, but the idea is the same, right? So I did see those theories where it's like, because of that bird thing, maybe it makes more sense for Ethan to die and then, the son to kind of almost connect those dots, with the bird line. I don't mind how it's done. I don't mind Scott's kind of vendetta against, fathers that just aren't there for their kids. And, his brother died simply because the father didn't go with him. Like, it was 100 feet away, right? The dad just had to get up. He's strong. He was big, right? He could have pulled the kid right out of the water, and John would have been fine, right? Instead, he's a drunk. Instead, he doesn't actually care about the kids, and you lose a brother because of it. So Scott completely, I think, mentally breaks at that point, and he lives his life to, try to find fathers that are capable of doing it, actually be able to save their son. Now, where I think it actually it breaks down a couple different times, but one way that I found pretty interesting, right, was, well, when you're doing the trials, aren't you still, like, doesn't that show that you do care? Because, like, we assume at least that people have tried his trials, right? Like, I believe Sean is the 9th victim, right? So there's 8 others. Now, one of them was the copycat killer, right? Kramer's son. So that one it didn't have a dad involved, okay? So Scott went around and found these fathers and took their sons, and we know a couple of them had to have tried the trials, right? Now, the thing is, the trial is kind of a mix of, like, willingness and then also skill. And I think that's where it breaks down a little bit because Scott, like, his motive, right, or, like, what he's literally trying to achieve is just like a parent that's willing to do what's necessary. But what if they're not skillful, right? What if they try all 5 of the trials and they give it their best go, but they literally, maybe they're too dumb, maybe they like have pain intolerance, whatever it might be, they literally cannot complete the trials, but they actually tried all 5. Well, doesn't that show that they still love their son? So that is one way where it doesn't necessarily land for me. Or, the very end, Ethan, if you do complete all the trials and Ethan manages to get to Sean, right, Scott will literally tell him, I've been waiting for somebody like you forever. Like, this was the goal, was to find somebody. And, Ethan gets mad at him. He turns his back, and then Scott's about to shoot him. Now, I assume Scott's going to shoot him because of the cops, right? Because, like, well, Ethan knows who he is now. He can identify him. Like, you got to take him out. That's fine. I get that. But I just feel like they could have spaced that out a bit because it's like, well, you did just tell him that, like, you did exactly what he wanted. Like, you're a good father. Like, literally, by that definition, you're a good father. Also, he saw Ethan try to save his other son and Jason. Like, he saw that. He was right there. And he saw that he went into, like, a coma and, Jason died. But, like, he already actually kind of proved that he would do what it takes to save his son. Otherwise, he wouldn't jump in front of a car, right? So, some things like that, basically. Or Madison, right, being told, basically, you got to imagine Madison was told by his mom, Scott Shelby's mom, right, that the family's last name was Shelby, okay? So she now knows that the person, the origami killer is Scott Shelby. And she makes this like, face, the shocked face. And it's like, but you've never met him before. Or when she can call Norman Jayden and she says like, he's the only one I can trust. She also has never met him and she's also never called him before. So how does she have his number? There are, those are a lot of moments, by the way. Like I'm listing out like, maybe 6, 7, 8 moments in this game that are pretty big and they're pretty meaty. They can take you out of it a bit, but I do think the general story is extremely strong. And I think I saw this written in I saw a lot of Reddit posts about this game over the last couple of days. I think the game still has just like this adventure like path to it where you can play it for the second time, third time, even first time, right? Even if you know this stuff, or at least I can, right? Like I knew a bunch of these things. Again, I didn't know about the Ethan supernatural, cut stuff, but I knew a lot about these plot holes, and I still think the game does a really good job of engaging you. The thing that I think a lot of these games get caught up in nowadays, specifically, as time has gone on, is the walking sim, right? This game, I think, does as good of a job as it possibly can to really not make you think that at all. There are some characters that have less to do, less like moment-to-moment gameplay things, but everybody is still like dynamic. Everybody's still engaged. When there are long shootouts with Scott, or Madison is like fending off, in the beginning when she's in her dream, right? Like there are very long sequences. Now I'm really good at quick time events, okay? You'll see in actually all of this gameplay I'm showing, I kept everybody alive. I went through the entire house with Scott when you're going to Kramer. I did all of that without getting hit once. I messed up a quick time event, I want to say maybe 3 times in the entire game. I'm really good at them. Now, if you're not good at them, I do think the game would get more messy, right? Because then you're kind of playing with fire. If you mess up certain moments, Norman, they can all die, except for Scott. Scott can go underwater, and you can kill him technically in that moment. Like, you could just sit there and do nothing, but then he'll appear moments later, and he'll be fine. So he has that, plot armor just because he is who he is. But, I will say, I think the moments of the quick time events, like, they are long, and they are dynamic. I know, like, look, this game can get very funny, and I know it's really, I think, like a timeless thing nowadays where people will share clips of you failing, right? So, like, Norman, I don't remember the guy's name, but when he's chasing the guy, right, through the market, and he unleashes, like, live chickens at you for some reason, right? Like, that whole thing. When you mess up, this game can get, like, unironically hilarious, okay? And I don't actually know if they planned it to be that funny, but it is. It can get downright hilarious when you mess up in certain ways. But I think this game does a great job of engaging you, of making these sequences last 3, 4, 5 minutes, of being kind of on your toes. Now, like, again, here's the thing, right? The game does have choice. The game does have consequence. There are, I think, 7 or 8 endings. You can do all the trials as Ethan. You can kind of pick and choose. I think you can quit, or I think you can not do all of them, right? You can lose Madison. You can lose Norman Jayden. You can lose everybody except for Scott, right? So the game, I do think, has those consequences, and that's, I guess, where I would lean into, like I was saying earlier. I'm not saying you don't take it seriously or anything like that. I'm not saying you have to completely block out, like, the noise of, like, hyper-analyzing it. Sometimes that's good. But when you're playing, especially, like, for the first time, that illusion of choice, like, making you think that you're actually doing things, I think the game 1,000% does it. I think even playing it for the 6th, 7th time, you sometimes second-guess yourself and say, okay, I got to remember, like, can my character die here? Like, do I have to be careful in this moment? And God, playing it for the first time, you don't know. You do not know when is, like, the last time you're going to play as a character, or what decision you make is going to end up really backfiring on you. Like, I think the game does a great job of disguising that. And I have played dozens and dozens of games with choices and consequences that do it far, far worse than Heavy Rain. So I do, we've talked a lot about the issues, and the game does have issues. In fact, I will say the longer I've played it, like the older I've gotten, and the more times I've played it, yes, there are more issues that pop up every single time. But I feel like sometimes, some parts of it, people go a little too hard on. You got to remember this is a 2010 game. The butterfly effect type thing, it's still not even great now. Like, how many games really do the butterfly effect thing all that great now? Not too many. I think Heavy Rain, honestly, is one of the better ones. Now, you can question the logic. Like, tryptophan, I forget the drug that Jayden uses, but, like, How that drug is connected to the AR, I have no idea, because they feel like they're two completely separate things, and they warn you, obviously the whole time that, the drug, well, I mean, it's actually kind of weird, because you think with him that the drug is the issue, but it could also be the AR, where it's like you're using the virtual reality basically too much. That's going to kill you. But then, like, there is an ending where he overdoses, or whatever happens, with the drug, and he dies. So it's kind of like both things he really shouldn't be using. Again, there are things here and there, but, and I mean, one thing that always bugs me, I have to throw it in just because, much like how funny the game can be, Origami versus Origami. I mean, for the love of Jesus Christ, can we get people on the same path? Now, there's a lot of French actors in this, and the acting, I would say 90% of the time. No, the sad thing is, I can't say 99% of the time, because there are some times where the accents slip in. The accents really slip in. I actually think Madison is one of the best voiced people in this entire game, and I believe she was the youngest of that core cast, and I believe she was a model. She wasn't even an actor, and I think David Cage or somebody like found her and thought she would be good. She is the best. I think in terms of her hiding her voice, I think she's also the greatest. Ethan, I think, is really good, but he's got some like weird lines at times. Scott, I do think, is extreme. Scott is the most consistent, okay? People like Lauren can be good, but then can also, I think, get into really weird spots with like line delivery. Norman is all over the freaking place. Again, the Origami versus Origami. And then also the kids, terrible. Apps, I mean, I remember that his kids, Jason and Sean, I knew they were bad. I mean, I've played enough times. It always surprises me how bad Scott and John are in the past. Like, and now, what I was saying earlier, like when I was playing it this time, it was glitching on me. John was like having strokes like in midair, and I would beat him. Like when you're chasing him for most of that mission, I was ahead of him, and then he would like zip by me, like the game was trying to catch up. So there was a lot of issues there. But just how bad they sound, and when he falls into the water, and he's like, "Don't worry, John, I'll get Dad." It's so bad, like unbelievably bad. So, there are moments like that. I would say that is easily the worst part of the game. But to be honest with you, I mean, like there's other moments of the game starts very slow. You'll do tasks like brushing your teeth. Even later on in the game, like when Scott is cooking Lauren like eggs, right? It's like, there needs to be times for decompression. I do think the game, in terms of, again, the acting and the storytelling, does do decompression like pretty okay. I also think it juggles them pretty okay. Like, I think the main thing people think of negatively when they think of like the juggling is how they have to do Scott, right? Where you have to hide things from us because, he is the killer, right? I get that. But in terms of like actually managing these four characters, and again, this is that other like choice and consequence thing that it's not the deepest. There's only so many ways this game can go, but it has that illusion that it can go even more. And I like that. Like, if it can successfully fool you, I actually don't think that's all that bad. And what I mean by that is the way that all these characters connect, right? Like they build, like Norman and them, they don't even, I mean, Madison, I think, actually comes in at the very end, right, in terms of like introducing these four characters. Like, she comes in like hour and a half into the game. It takes its time, and then these characters will kind of dynamically thread. Now, again, some of them are done better than others, like Madison and Ethan, it's done more organically, even though like her finding the motel is a little bit of a stretch, but still, their relationship is more organic. Her and Jaden don't really match, right? But then, okay, well, how does Jaden tie into the whole thing? Well, you got to connect him to Ethan, right? Then you gotta have to get the trials involved. And then Scott, now, like the thing with Scott is, it's a thing where I'm definitely willing to give the game more than maybe it deserves, at least from my perspective. I'm willing to give it because, like I said earlier, I love the idea of the trials. I love what he's actually, I don't actually, like I wouldn't do it myself, but I like the concept of, what he's trying to do. And I do like the idea of, and I'm sure it's been done before, but see, I don't watch a lot of TV or movies, so like this was an original idea to me when I'm playing it as a 13, 14-year-old. Honestly, I still haven't watched a lot of movies and TV. It's still kind of an original idea to this day. The fact that he is going around, like, literally cleaning up after himself. Now, why do these people still have cell phones from their husbands that went missing? Why does the guy in the drugstore still have the box? These are all things the police would have 1,000% taken from them. So how they have it, I have no idea. But again, I think actually the game does an incredibly good job of hiding it in the way where Scott is a private detective. No, he lies about, right? He's not actually one, but he goes around and he's cleaning up, basically he's cleaning up his mess, right? He's tying all loose ends. He wants lists. He wants anything that can connect him. Now, I don't really know if he has any end goal, because it's like eventually you're going to get caught, or if somebody does complete all your trials like Ethan does, you kind of have to reveal yourself, and therefore you're kind of screwed there too. So, eventually there was an end game. I guess maybe he didn't think that far ahead, but I love that idea. I love the idea that he's going around, and it fools, okay, it can only really fool you once, because then that it's coming every other time that you play it. Playing it for the 6th, 7th time and looking at it and saying, all right, I really try when I replay these games for this channel, I try to put myself in that moment of, okay, like what is this game? Like really trying to ignore the fact that it could be my 10th time playing it or my 2nd time playing it. But, there are things that are unavoidable, like you know who the Origami Killer is, right? But playing as Scott, it's like, again, they hide his internal thoughts. They hide what he does to the shopkeeper. But beyond that, it's like, I think they do a good enough job where it's like he's doing his own investigation. He's trying to find he's doing it in his own way, right? Like Norman is doing it in his own way as well, but Scott's doing it in his way. He's trying to find all this evidence from all these different people that have been victims, basically, of the Origami Killer. And then, he connects it. And now, little do you know, he's basically trying to find a scapegoat, right? He's trying to pin it on something. And it turns out, and I think he knows this, right, that it's a copycat killer in the first place. So, I really like that. I think that's kind of smart. And especially if you don't know how this game goes, like that keeps you in it, and it doesn't. Anytime it makes you suspicious of him, they throw something else. Like even when you visit John Shepard's grave, okay, and you say, something just feels like, even the way that he like talks in that scene, it's like, I almost feel like that's a hint where, hey, we really want you to start to think it could be him. But then they walk away, and then Kramer comes and he gives he puts the flowers on the grave. So it's like, okay, well now it goes right back onto him and his son, and less on Scott. Now that's a misdirection for sure, right? But, in the moment, you don't really know that. So I really love those elements. And like I said, when it comes to gameplay, I think this game does a really good job of keeping you engaged. This is not a walking sim. I really don't, Norman has really cool AI technology, right, where you're trying to find clues and stuff. And, everybody else is a little bit more like by the books in terms of, walking around, interacting with stuff. But, Ethan is always doing trials. Everybody's always getting, like Norman is always getting into fights and like half losing them, right? So his scenes are always these really long 2-3 minute quick time events, and if you fail them, like against Mad Jack, you're dead. He literally will kill you then and there, right? So you've got to be really careful with these characters, and a lot of the time, you might walk around and look at a room or two, but that's not even, I would say that's not even half of the game. Most of the game is completing these trials as Ethan. Most of these times are like figuring out this, this kind of murder mystery story that's going on, and most of these times are long, extended things where you are laser, you can't really not focus on this game. That's the thing that I can't appreciate about these games. We all have technology. I have a phone and I listen to podcasts and stuff, and I'll sometimes look away, from the TV or from my monitor, and it's like, well, you really can't do that here, right? Like if there's moments where it's a cutscene of you trying to open a door. Madison does this, Scott does this in the beginning of the game, and they'll shut the door on you, and you can press up, right, as a quick time event, and they'll catch the door before they close. That's a scene 99 out of 100, actually, right? 99 out of 100 games, that door will close, and that's the cutscene. But in this game, you can stop the door, and that kind of takes away, because I believe if the door closes, you'll have to do something else right after it. So it's a quick way of keeping you engaged, and like you just have to pay attention. And then these 3-minute, brawls for your life. If you miss 3, 4, 5 things, depending on which mission it is, but again, you don't necessarily know that in the moment. If you're playing this for the first time, anything that you do, right? Somebody's swinging at you with a sword, right? You might think that's it, right? Little do you know, if you play it a couple times, you say, okay, well, this character can really only be killed here, here, and here, right? That's really how it goes. Or, if Ethan does the trials and Madison is there, they're not going to shoot him, but they will shoot him in other circumstances, right? So it's like, once you know, but the first time, or especially if you're trying to experiment and do things like outside of your comfort zone, you're trying to purposely get somebody killed to kind of shake up the story, like, you don't really know how it's going to go. I don't know. I think talking about it, I've always loved this game. I really have. I've always thought this game was really good, cutting edge technology at the time, right? It looked really, really great to me as a 13, 14-year-old, and I loved it. I loved the mystery. I loved the quick time events. The quick time events, in the late 2000s, early 2010s really overstayed their welcome. I kind of grew up on that. I got into gaming pretty heavily, like PS3, 360 era, when I was 13. And it was kind of towards the tail end of the quick time events. So like Heavy Rain, I think actually kind of made people mad. And, they kind of pivoted when it came to Beyond Two Souls afterwards. God of War 3. These are games that I freaking love. And I love them actually in part because of the quick time events. Not everybody does that though, right? Like that's kind of a me thing. But I think that really helps the gameplay in this game in particular. Like the walking in terms of the movement and them kind of getting confused of which direction you're going to go. That does get annoying in this game too. It's not a perfect game. And the plot holes definitely hold it back from like greatness or like ultimate greatness. But you know what? I'll always love it. It does have its problems. And, I would have done things a little bit differently if it was me. I saw a lot of people saying, well, just don't play as Scott. I think it was mainly just the shopkeeper was the main thing to me, where it's like, if they wanted to hide his internal thoughts, again, as I said earlier, because the game wants you to take it seriously, and because there's supposed to be nobody there when he's doing things on his own or he's investigating on his own in his house or in his apartment, right? There's no reason for him to put on an act. There's no reason for his thoughts to not be like legitimate and genuine, and yet they are, right? They're fake. So that doesn't check out like actually at all. And again, like the split personality thing, I'm willing to buy to a degree, but there's still that part where it's like, well, but he doesn't need to do a split personality thing because there's nobody in the room, or there's no, what I mean? It doesn't make sense for that to happen. So there are those moments, and that does bring it down a little, and it brings it down, I would say, a little bit more and more, especially the more serious you want to take it. But I love this game. I always have. I probably always will. It's a relic of the past. It's a relic of that. 2010 PS3, kind of when it was starting to already when it was starting to peak, right? Like Uncharted 2 already came out at this point, and you're getting closer really to the end of the generation in 2013. Like this was kind of Sony cooking, and obviously this wasn't a first party game. It was a second party game with Quantic Dream. But I'll always love this game. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure as always you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.